Now, India has long been vaunted as the world's biggest democracy, and it's just gone to the polls, and it's an earthquake. Well, it's important, certainly. What happens in India should be important for all of us, and it's dramatic for a variety of reasons. Now, Modi has been the Prime Minister of India since the last 10 years. Now, he's a Hindu nationalist. India was founded as a secular democracy. Obviously, most of its population are of Hindu heritage, but it always has had a large Muslim minority as well. And the Hindu nationalist project has always been based on hostility towards that minority, which Modi has encapsulated in that project, the BJP, his party. Now, there's no better person to speak about what's happened in these elections when Modi was expected, his party, to gain a massive majority, maybe even a supermajority, to amend the Indian constitution and embed Hindu nationalism even further. That didn't happen. So this is big news, everyone. I'm really delighted to be joined by Rana Ayyub. He was the perfect person to speak to. Writer, for example, Washington Post, and is someone who many of us look to when discussing all things to do with Indian politics. So Rana, it's great to speak to you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's a good day for many Indians.
Yeah, I thought you might be cheerful. Let's just, for those who don't know much about Modi, and given, he's now actually the leader of the most populous nation on earth. India has surpassed China in terms of population. We're talking about the most populous nation on earth. Having an election, it's no small feat. Can you just explain to people who don't know much about Modi, if we're thinking Donald Trump, we're thinking Bolsonaro in Brazil, we're thinking Viktor Orban in Hungary, is this what we're talking? How would you explain him to an audience who don't know much about him?
I think it would be a good mix of Viktor Orban and Donald Trump. I mean, a few days before the elections, Modi gave an interview in which he said that he feels he is not biological born, but a divine born, that he wasn't born biologically. So, and across the country this time during these elections, I think Modi was not standing as a candidate. It was more like a godlike creature, giving his blessings to people, a cult. The entire election was fought around the cult of Modi, Narendra Modi. Now, this is a leader who, in 2 terms of in power as the Prime Minister of India, and in 3 terms of his power as the Chief Minister of the state of Gujarat, where 1,000 Muslims were massacred under his watch. He was not allowed entry into the United States till he became the Prime Minister of the country. The last 10 years of Modi rule has been predominantly about majoritarianism. And one of the most salient features of his majoritarianism is his anti-Muslim rhetoric and anti-Muslim policies, majoritarian policies, which is a part of the Hindu nationalist playbook. But this particular election, Modi is always associated with dog whistle against Muslims. He refers to Muslims as infiltrators, the children of Mughals, people who are child-producing factories. But this particular election, there were no innuendos. He was direct. In the first election speech, and after the first phase, he said, if the opposition comes to power, Muslims are going to take away your resources because these are people who produce more children. These are the people, if you vote for the Congress, you will have more Muslims in the cricket team. He accused Muslims of love jihad, a conspiracy theory in which apparently Muslim men are marrying Hindu women as a part of this grand plan to convert more Hindu women to Islam, a conspiracy theory which now is leading to arrest of Muslims across the country. This is a man who notified the Citizenship Amendment Act, according to which citizens of India, Muslims of India, have to prove their citizenship. And India will give citizenship to persecuted minorities except Muslims from Asia. This has been his politics. Talking about the election, I feel this has been the most undemocratic election in the history of India, simply because just before the elections, he arrested leaders of the opposition on corruption charges. Central agencies are being used to arrest leaders of opposition, critics, dissenters. Remember Putin. Their bank accounts of critics of the Congress party and other parties being frozen, journalists arrested, journalists raided. The BBC did a documentary on Modi last year, and they had raids on their office just last year. So given the circumstance, and of course we have a mainstream media which is completely craven. It's basically an extension of the Modi government. In these circumstances, if Modi's victory and if Modi gets a reduced majority, I think there is a reason for the country to heave a sigh of relief. especially for the 220 million Muslim population, which is the third largest population of Muslims in India. So that's what the elections have been so far in a nutshell.
I mean, as I say, India was founded to be a secular nation, and the Congress Party ruled for so much of India's history since it won independence. So, I mean, kind of, you know, what I guess partly what do you think happened there? How have we ended up? I mean, India became more economically advanced, industrialized, and with that, I mean, this goes against a lot of theories, not just in India but elsewhere. You got the rise of Hindu nationalism, and that form of Hindu nationalism, we're talking actually, is often in the cities, wasn't it? It's the urban populations often. So what is going on there? Because that's still the case, isn't it? The urban populations were more likely.
Absolutely. I mean, the city that I'm sitting in right now, New Delhi, 7 out of 7 candidates voted for the BJP. I mean, were won on the BJP ticket. So this is the urban population. This is the capital city of India. So I think I'll give you an example. I'm a part of a WhatsApp group on which there are mostly these Harvard, Ivy League grads. And we were having this conversation about majoritarianism. And one of them turned back and said, Rana, we have so many Islamic countries. We finally need to have one Hindu nation. So I think this desire to this idea about this Hindu victimhood that Modi created in a majority of Indians, that, you know, these Muslims, they try to establish their rule everywhere. We need to have our own supremacy. We need to have our own Hindu laws. Muslims are producing more children. They're going to overtake the Hindu population. And more than anything else, what he has sold to the urban population, most of them do not even stay in India, is the idea that somehow under Modi, India's popularity is soaring. So much so that one of the biggest pieces of disinformation, which was also a part of Modi's election campaign, is that Modi got the war in Ukraine stopped. And it's hilarious. It's hilarious if one were to just look at it. I mean, how do you say that with a straight face? But to think that explains, it also is an indication of the level of propaganda and how communications platforms like WhatsApp, social media.
So why were the predictions just so off? And why did rural India swing against Modi?
I think the predictions, especially, I mean, let's talk about the exit polls. I think they were skewed heavily in the favor of Narendra Modi. And of course, there was a population which was reacting out of a place of despondency because they had seen Modi's worst instincts as a dictator, as an authoritarian leader. And if you have used every central agency, during the entire election campaign, in many instances, Muslims were not allowed to vote. Modi is giving hate speeches in public, and the election commission is looking the other way. Right? The election commission is an extension, is an arm of the Indian constitution. It is not an arm of the Modi government. So with these in place, with all the odds stacked against the Indian opposition, right? People generally thought, what's the point of this election? It's going to be a Modi victory, right? I mean, even in the streets in the first 2 phases, people were like, oh, this is the most dull election in the history of India. It's going to be like Modi was in a way anointing himself as the next prime minister of India. It's only, I think, what people refuse to see is that rural India, where there is maximum rural agrarian distress, there is inflation, right? There are no jobs. That's where I think people realized, people conflated the glamour of urban cities and the big fat weddings of industrialists, and conflated that with that this is what India looks like. But this is not what India looks like. A majority of India lives in rural areas, and those people are in distress. The fact that I think the biggest the most therapeutic moment for Indians who did not want Modi to return to power and were subject to his majoritarianism. I think the fact that Faizabad constituency, which houses the Ram Temple, which Modi built inaugurated the Ram Temple on the 22nd of January, and the entire country, he asked everybody in the country to have a saffron flag outside their window. This was literally 4 days before the Republic Day of India, and the Republic Day celebrates the constitution of the country. So 4 days before the Republic Day, we had the entire country was literally saffron. And there were a few families that decided to put the national tricolor, and they were intimidated because they had chosen to plant the national tricolor as opposed to saffron. So in that constituency, which has 80% Hindu population, Modi lost. This is probably the biggest upset in this election that Modi has witnessed. Hate speech has become a norm in Indian politics. The Home Minister of India, who's responsible for law and order, says, I mean, if anybody, a cow trader is caught killing a cow, we will hang them upside down. It was a dog whistle against Muslims, right? But we saw in this election that leaders who gave hate speech and provocative speeches lost with a big margin, which means that Modi was relying too heavily on the Hindu-Muslim polarization, on the anti-Muslim instincts and the anti-Muslim prejudice, not realizing that it was past its shelf life, that at some point, people in India would ask for jobs and employment and food on their plate. And that's something Modi could not offer, which is why the reduced majority.
I mean, Amnesty International, the human rights organization, earlier this year, they had a report, crackdown on opposition reaches a crisis point ahead of national elections. They noted the arrest, for example, of the Delhi state chief minister, opposition leader for the Aam Admi Party, the freezing of bank accounts of the Indian National Congress. For example, the chair of the board, this was Amnesty International was talking about this. What next for the opposition? I mean, do the government, do you think, will they retreat, Modi, or will they double down on a crackdown? Is there now wind in the sails of opposition, which has felt very cowed up to this point?
Well, talking about Amnesty, I'm glad you brought up Amnesty. Agnes Kalamard, who was the Secretary General of Amnesty International, was visiting Asia, and the only country she was not allowed entry was India. For her, I mean, that explains. It's not just Amnesty. Freedom House has downgraded India to an electoral autocracy. There's so many indices on World Press Freedom Index. We are in the 161st or 158th position. The Prime Minister has not taken a single press conference in 10 years. He does not speak to the media. So I feel like, despite everything and despite the constant hate that we saw in this election, I feel like people of this country were not expecting much from the Indian opposition. It felt like they had conceded defeat long ago. So this victory, I think, is a shot in the arm that if they could work harder, Modi was not the invincible leader that everybody thought he was, that the cult of Modi is here to stay. And Modi himself said, I'm going to be here for the next 25 years, right? He's 73 right now. And he said, I'm going to be here for the next 25 years if you allow me to rule. So that invincibility, that hubris that Modi had displayed, I think there's a dent in that hubris. And that is very important for a country like India, for a democracy like India, because many ministers in Modi's cabinet had hinted at changing the constitution of the country. And Hindu nationalists have a problem with the word secular, right? I mean, it is the desire to see India as a Hindu nation. So much so that on the Republic Day, on 26th of January, when the Instagram page of BJP shared the constitution, they removed the word secular republics. And that's the constitution that they shared. So the biggest apprehension was that if Modi gets a third term with a majority, then that's probably what he might be inclined to do. And that would be disastrous for a country like India, because then that would be a democracy that we would be unable to save. It would be a country without, I mean, we would be unable to redeem this country and the democratic status of this country. So I think in that sense, there is a sense of relief that now he has coalition partners. He has never fought. He has always won elections with an absolute majority. So he has ruled the country with an iron hand, but now he's at the mercy of coalition partners, some of whom are also secular parties, right? So one expects that he might not be as brazen as he was in the last two terms. But having said that, we're talking about Narendra Modi here, who has used every instrument, every agency at his disposal to silence critics. So I think it would be too early to celebrate, and that's what I've been saying in all the interviews. I think it's too early to celebrate, but yes, it is a shot in the arm for opposition which believed that the fight against Modi was impossible.
Just a final thing, I'm interested in this just because it really differs so wildly from country to country. Americans and Britons are used to younger generations being more progressive than their older generations, but that does not hold true in lots of countries. In some countries, younger people are significantly more reactionary than older people. So I'm just wondering, is there an age split in India? Or is this, I mean, actually it's quite interesting. It is a case of urban India being more likely to support Hindu nationalism and rural India being more opposed, which turns out a lot of stereotypes to that.
I think the last two terms, I had reasons to believe that young India too voted for Modi significantly, because there was also no understanding of Modi's past. right? And because you have a mainstream media which has in a way developed amnesia over his past. So in fact, a lot of the hate speeches that Modi has given, I mean, you don't find them on YouTube anymore. So they don't have a reference point to, and a lot of the conversations in the family, which is the middle class, and the generation which is in their 40s and 50s, older generation, do see Modi as the man who's going to redeem Hindu India for them, right? So I think a lot of them, and then of course incredible amounts of propaganda and misinformation using Facebook and Twitter, the kind of propaganda that has seeped into our living rooms, that Modi is a kind of leader with extraordinary powers, that the world is prostrating before him. Biden is hosting him for the as a state guest. Biden, that Biden cannot do without Modi, that that Putin needs Modi. He's a great friend, that Netanyahu and Modi are best friends, and of course that the love that Hindu nationalists have for Zionists, which is quite well known and documented. If you see any Zionist tweet on the Indian internet, you will see a lot of Indian right wing applauding and cheering. So yeah, there is a lot that goes in. They believe that Netanyahu and Modi are cut from the same cloth, and which is why they need and like Netanyahu, Modi is that only leader who has shown Muslims their place. About the age and urban rural phenomena, I think for the last two elections, Modi had overwhelming support from sections of urban and rural India. But this time particularly, I feel like the urban India might have still voted for Modi, but it is the rural India from which Modi has got this pushback. And that is what I think Modi should have factored in. He went to all these rural areas, stoking the communal fire, not realizing that these are people, many of them who are below poverty line. You cannot feed them communalism on a daily basis. At the end of the day, they need their crops to grow. They need to put food on the plates of their family members. So I think the rural distress really worked in favor of the opposition this time, and in favor of the country, if I could say so.
Well, Rana, that's so brilliantly explained and very heartening. I remember after the last Indian elections speaking to progressive Indians who, frankly, were in utter despair about India and about its future. And this matters for all of us, because the tendency over the last few years has been towards what you describe as electoral autocracy, where countries which keep the trappings of democracy, but the substance is rotted out. Hungary is a really good example of that. I mean, obviously, Putin's Russia's way down that line. It's now just a totalitarian dictatorship virtually. But, we saw the defeat of Bolsonaro. That was heartening. There's obviously the fear of what happens with Donald Trump, but Modi was definitely a figurehead, as you say, and anyone who criticizes Modi online knows what it's like to be suddenly dogpiled. But also, if you criticize Israel's murderous onslaught in Gaza, you'll also get dogpiled by Modi supporters. So do leave your comments, everyone. Do share, press like. But Rana, brilliant, as I would always have expected. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure everyone you share. Thanks so much, Rana.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure talking to you.